Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to talk about Azure networking part called Azure VNets. So first, if you compare this Azure VNet with AWS resources, like a AWS resource called VPC, Virtual Private Cloud. So almost I found most of the options are similar. In Azure, we call it as a VNet. In AWS, we call it as a VPC. So these VNets we are going to create within a region. So you can create a VNet in, India Central or US West, or you can choose a region and you can create a VNet. So within that VNet, we are going to create a subnet. So at VNet level, we need to provide a CIDR block, and within that CIDR, we can create multiple subnets. And how exactly we have route tables, in similar manner, we have system-defined routes and user-defined routes. So then we have service endpoints and private endpoints. That is equivalent to gateway endpoints and interface endpoints in AWS environment. And in Azure, we have Network Security Group or NSG. In AWS, we have Network ACL. All right, I'm going to make this video into two parts. In part one, I'm going to talk how to create a VNet and how to create subnets. So then in another video, I'm going to discuss about endpoints. All right, so here I logged into Azure Portal. So first thing, go and search for VNet, virtual networks. So if you want to create a new virtual network, you can go and click on create. Otherwise, whenever you are launching a virtual machine, whenever you are creating a virtual machine, so if you don't have any VNet, it will create one automatically. So you just provide some basic information. For example, if you are creating a new resource group, and I'm going to give some random name here. All right, so then when I navigate to network, you see here it's showing as a new. So in Azure, if you ever found this new in front of any resource name, so that means the resource is not available and it is going to create one now. All right, so this is one way you can create. Other one is you manually navigate to virtual networks, create a virtual network, click on create. And subscription, I'm going with free trial. And resource group, what resource group? So we already have compute RG and network watcher RG. So if you want to create a new one, you can go and create one here. So custom VNet RG is a name I'm giving here. Sorry, custom VNet RG is a name I'm giving. Click on create. So then what is instance name? So basically these VNet is going to use an instance within this region. So you just provide a name for this instance. Let me call this as dev VNet. Then click on next. IP addresses. So by defaultly this Azure will pick one CIDR block automatically. So you can use any of the private IP address ranges. Like you can use 10 series, you can use 172.16 to 172.31 you can use, or you can use 192.168 series. So /16 is a default subnet it is picking. So /16 means we are going to get 65,531 IP addresses, 36 IP addresses, but Azure also reserve 5 IP addresses, so we always need to do -5. So if you want to add another CIDR block, you can give that here, or else, as I told you, you do always have an option to go and modify this. So for example, I want to go with 192.168.0.0/16 series. I'm going to give that here. Remember one thing, if you are going to enable communication between multiple VNets, so these VNet should IP address should not conflict. Just like in AWS also same. If you want to enable communication between multiple VPCs, both should not have same IP address ranges. The IP conflict will happen. So I'm going with 192.168.0.0/16. All right, so then the subnets, you go and click on add subnet and then give a subnet name. I'm going to call this as web subnet, and the range. So I'm going to take 192.168, like 100.0/24 or 1.0/24. We can go and pick any. So if you are not really sure about this calculation, I personally suggest you to go with this website, Visual Subnet Calculator. This is a website. So whatever the range you want to use, okay, I decided to go with 192.168.0.0/16. So then click on update. So we are going to get total 65,534. Basically, this website will do regular calculation. So it will do only -2. All right. So if you want to create only one subnet, then you can give this CIDR block. Or if you want to break down into multiple subnets, divide. So you can do, okay, so let's go with the /24 subnet. This is one subnet. This is another subnet. I can break down into multiple. So, you can pick these IP addresses and you can create. Okay, for first subnet, I'm going to give this. Now, whatever the VMs we are going to launch within the subnet, the IP will allocate it from this range. Click on add. I want to add another subnet. Add subnet. I'm going to call this as a data subnet, and the CIDR block, I'm going to pick the second one. So then click on add. All right, we have defined our regular IP address, and we have created two subnets within this VNet. Then navigate to security. So I'm not going with Bastion host for now, and firewall is disabled. I'm going with all the default options now. We'll discuss or we'll go through that in our later videos. Review and create. So now a virtual network is creating. So validation is passed. We are good to create. Click on create. All right, now virtual network got created. So, here in Azure, if you want to provide internet to, like, any of the private subnet and all, you no need to depend on NAT instance or NAT gateway mechanism. So that is like, we have an option here that your resources can communicate with the internet. And what are all the subnets we created within this VNet? So if you observe these subnets, right? So whatever the VM running inside this subnet, that can communicate with another VM running in this subnet. Or if you have another VM that is running in another subnet also, it can communicate. If you want to enable communication with different one, yes, we can do that by using pairing options. All right, so this VNet creation is now completed. Okay, so let's go and let's launch a VM now. The same VM I'm going to use to explain these endpoints also. All right, so now click on create virtual machine, and here you need to choose the subscription and resource group. I'm going to use this custom VNet resource group. All right, so what is the virtual machine name you want to give? I'm going to call this as my dev VNet test is a name I'm giving. So I'm going to choose Central India, standard, and I'm going to choose CentOS image. I'm going with the free service eligible one, that BS1. Also, I'm going with an SSH key. I already have an existing key that's stored in Azure VM, I'm going to use Azure Linux key pair, and I'm going to open HTTP also. If in future I'm going to make it as a web server. So then disks, I'm going with default option. This is a OS disk, and if you want to add additional disk, you can add from here. When coming to network, in what VNet you want to run this. So as this VM is creating under custom VNet resource group. So this resource group have dev VNet. I'm going to choose that. Now, in what subnet you want to? So you do have an option to choose. You want to run it in web subnet or data subnet, you can select it. And public IP address, it's going to create a public IP address. And next security group, I'm going with basic, and inbound ports, as we selected in previous screen, we are going with 80 and 22. So if you want to delete the public IP and NIC card when we delete this VM, we can simply select this option, the newly created public IP address, and the NIC card created for this, or network interface card created for this VM is going to delete. I'm not going to touch any load balancing now. And management, you can give auto shutdown. So if you want to, in your lab environment, you're trying something, and so every day at 7 p.m. or 10 p.m., you want to shut down this VM automatically. So then you can use this enable auto shutdown option. Monitoring, this is like a CloudWatch when compared with AWS. Custom data. So then you can add a tag and review and create. So now it is going to perform the uh, validation. So now the validation is passed. We can go ahead and we can click on create. All right. So now we have created a virtual machine within a newly created VNet, and we can get connected to it. It's pretty simple compared with AWS. In AWS, if you want to create a VPC, you need to take care about security group. We need to create about subnets. We need to configure route tables. We need to create internet gateway, and we need to associate. However, we have the wizard. So, but if you want to create every component manually, so it involves with multiple steps. But here it looks a bit simple. All right, so now we have created a VNet and we got the public IP address. Let's grab the public IP address and let's get connected to it. I'm going to open the terminal, SSH-I, Azure Linux, Azure user at the rate, I'm giving the public IP address of my Azure VM, just type yes, and we can see that here we got connected to this Azure VM that is running in our custom VNet. All right, so if you test, we can access internet within this machine, and we are able to access this machine over the internet. So just to test, I'm going to um, give wget https www.google.com. You see that here we got connected to this. Uh, you know, it's resolving that google.com. It's connecting to google.com, and HTTP request status is 200, that is okay or success. So you see that? So that means we have internet within this machine, and however I connected to this Azure VM from my local network. So it's accessible over the internet. All right, so this is our first video on our VNet, and we do have an option called system defined routes and user defined routes. When coming to system defined routes, so for example, whatever the subnets you have within this VNet, these all subnet resources can communicate each other. Same subnet resources or another subnet resources can communicate each other. So as both subnets are running in same VNet, so Azure will use system defined routes to enable the communication. Also, whatever the VM you have in this particular subnet or in another subnet, it can access internet also. So there also it is going to use system defined routes. So if you want to filter the traffic, or if you want to add any DMZ subnet, or you have a virtual network appliance that want to filter all the traffic going to a particular subnet, so then you can add one more subnet in between and you can route traffic via that particular subnet to these subnets. So that's the simplest one is DMZ, right? So in that scenario, we can define user defined routes. So this is just like adding entries within our route tables if we compare this with the AWS environment. All right, that's it for this video. See you again next video to discuss service endpoints and private endpoints. Thank you guys.